What is up, booktube? It's Monty. Today I'm back again once again with another video, and I'm going to do a sort of recent reads wrap-up type situation. At first, I wasn't going to go all the way back to October, but seeing as my little choose your own adventure situation, I feel like it was not the serve I was expecting it to be. I'm not really entirely sure how many people stayed through and and actually saw what I thought about those books. So those things I'm going to quickly run down because there are full-length vlogs for everything that I read in the month of October, so you can figure it out there. And then there are some things that I won't talk about when we get towards the end of December, because again, there are like a bunch of full-length vlogs and things. But I kind of wanted to do a year-end video. I figured just doing my stats was going to be a little bit boring, so here we are. That's what we're going to do. The first book I need to talk about is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This was my Patreon reading vlog situation, so if you're on Patreon, you know what I thought about that. But basically, I thought it was fine. Like, there were aspects of the world that I enjoyed. I liked the pacing of the book. I liked the setting of the book. I liked the characters a little bit. I liked them more than I like Romeo and Juliet, let's say. I think I gave it 3 stars. I don't know if I just said that, but 3 stars. Everything was fine. It was serviceable. It was, we were doing what we needed to be done. But I did understand why the book did not wrap up in that first book. I felt that it felt unnecessary. And because of the story, the actual narrative in These Violent Delights has a conclusion, like the story reaches a natural end, I thought that it was weird to drag it out over 2 books. So I don't know. I think this was published by Simon and Simon, and I don't know why Simon wanted that to be a duology. I don't know if Chloe wanted that to be a duology, but it certainly did not feel like it needed to be one. And so I don't understand why anybody was anticipating the sequel when the first book is just fine. Like, it was just okay. Next up, I read The Project by Courtney Summers. This book was horrible. Definitely honorable mention for one of the worst books I've ever read in my entire life. How this got published, couldn't tell you. Doesn't make a lick of sense to me. Doesn't make a lick of sense to anybody that I know, but here we are. Basically, in this one, we are following one sister as she tries to find her sister that she lost to a cult. I've seen some people talk about how, like, she wakes up from a coma and she finds out her sister's in this cult. And, like, that's not entirely accurate. We find out that the sister, let's just click on it. I already have fucking Goodreads open. Let's not call her the sister. Okay, so when Loeb was 16, she definitely lost both of her parents. But at that point, B was already in communication with the cult. But the book does not take place when Loeb is 16 years old. The book takes place 3 years later, after B has fully joined the cult. Her sister knows she is in the cult. And one day she meets this man on the train platform who commits suicide, and that kind of like spurs her to look into this cult because she's an assistant at this like really hot shot like New Yorker-esque magazine, right? Like, people pay attention to this little newspaper article thing that these people be running. And so she gets it into her little head that she's going to write an expose about the cult and maybe get her sister out of the cult. And what actually happens is neither of those things happen. Neither of those things. Because Lo is an idiot, completely incompetent, and B is just weird. I think that the book did like it tried to do this thing where you could see the character like fall into the cult, but the way that they did that, I did not buy. Like, do I think that people fall into cults all the time? Yes. Do I think that you can be manipulated into a cult? Yes. Do I think that it made sense for Lo? No, I do not. I thought that it just was entirely unbelievable, and Lo was just an idiot. Like, there was no making me believe, oh, she got like lured in, they were taking advantage of her. No, sis was just stupid. So for me, the book was just horrible from beginning to end. Nothing good happened in that book. Definitely don't recommend it. I definitely believe that it's just as bad as Sadie, so I was not entirely surprised. Next, I read What Beauty There Is by Corey Anderson. This takes place in Idaho. We follow a protagonist who's like 16 years old. His father is dead at the beginning. No, his father's in prison. His mother commits suicide at the beginning of the book. And so it's just him and his little brother, Maddie. And Maddie was the highlight of this book. Maddie was like one of those precocious 10-year-olds that like never quite act like they're 10 years old, but it's fine because they're like super knowledgeable and precocious and like they're 10. So like you kind of love them for it. and it's just the two of them, and he gets it into his head that he's gonna go find the money that his father stole that like landed him in prison, like allegedly happened. Only that like we don't actually follow that happening in the book. Instead we follow this like girl from school helping him, and them like being chased by the police, and their uncle getting hit by a car and like flying into the air, and a very detailed scene of brain matter splattering in the intersection. It was just a lot, because at the same time that our protagonist is looking for this money, the little drug dealer man is also looking for the money. But there's a scene at the beginning of the book where the drug dealer man could have shot our protagonist in the face, but he chooses not to. And so now he's kind of upset that the boy didn't die when he just like left him for dead in the snow. But I'm like, if you left somebody for dead and they managed to get out of there, I mean, you can't really be mad at them, because you had every opportunity to shoot them in the face and you didn't shoot them in the face. So you can only really blame yourself. Then I read Iron Widow by Sharon J. Zhao, and I put this on my worst of the year list, and I still stand by that, because it was just not a very good book. The world building I did not believe was believable up until like, again, like the last 5 pages of the book. The characters I thought were flat, the stakes I thought non-existent, the politics and the political messaging and themes I thought were very ham-fisted, especially for something that was a young adult novel. And I've seen people say that, oh, this definitely should have been adult, this should have been adult. And I think that as an adult novel, this would have flopped, because the characters are paper thin, the plot is paper thin, the motivations, the character, like, this is a very paper thin book. So while there was probably sexy times that Sharon has talked about them having to cut, I do not believe that as like in the adult market, this is not made the New York Times bestseller list. This needed to stay right where it's at, and I hope that for book 2, those things get fleshed out more. Then I read not the only, but the first like 5-star reading experience of that entire situation, and that was Malice by Heather Walter. And this was very close to being on my best of the year list. This is one of like 2 sapphic books that I read in 2021 that I thoroughly enjoyed from beginning to end. This is the Sleeping Beauty retelling that like kind of there was a lot of buzz for this when it came out earlier in the year, but then I saw it kind of just like die out and fade away. And this was like gorgeous. I thought that If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy did really interesting things with the Cinderella mythos, and like that was really fun to read. And I think that Malice equally does an interesting spin on the Sleeping Beauty mythology, the Sleeping Beauty story that we know. So here we follow Alice, who is an evil fae in the land of like the regular human. I think they're essentially humans, but there are some of these people who have been like blessed by the fae, like they're the children of the people who got blessed by the fae hundreds of years ago, and they have like this golden blood, and they can use this golden blood to like do things. But Alice, because she's like, you know, this evil fae creature, she has green blood, and so she thought that she could really only curse people, and so she's like the hidden one, you know, under the cupboards that like people they are sort of ashamed to like visit. Like they visit her in secret because nobody wants to like be known as a person who went to the evil fae person, but they still go to her because they need her services. And we get to follow her as she falls in love, and she gets to learn the history of her like lineage, and like at the end of the book you get to see her become like the Maleficent that people are like. She's not really the Maleficent, because there is definitely another character that is actually the Maleficent of the story, but you still get to see Alice just like go full on rage queen and just like start burning shit down and like getting the revenge on all these people that had wronged her. And it was the most cathartic experience. I loved it. I am so excited for Miss Rule. It comes out later this year. I already know it's going to be 10 out of 10. Then I read You're So Dead by Ash Parsons. This was supposed to be a sort of like comedic take on like the Fire Festival, but like make it a murder mystery thriller, and it was just bad. It's so unremarkable that it's not even like worst of the year. It's just, don't even read it. Then I read As Far As You'll Take Me by Phil Stamper, and this was supposed to kind of remind me, like the premise of this reminded me a little bit of How It Blew Up, where we have our protagonist who has lied to his family, and he said that he got into this really, you know, reputable performing arts like musicianship thing in London, but instead he's just going to like live with his cousin in a flat that they got together, or in his like aunt's house, and figure out how he's going to just stay in the UK like for the rest of his life, because his parents did not really react well when he came out as gay. And this book was just bad. I didn't like anything about this, and I wasn't entirely surprised because I did not like The Gravity of Us. I think that As Far As You'll Take Me might be better than The Gravity of Us, but I think I'm done with Phil Stamper, which is fine because he seems to be cornering the market. He's becoming, the next Adam Silvera. He has Golden Boys and A Middle Grade coming out this year. He doesn't need my readership. He's doing just fine without me. Then I read Some Girls Do by Jennifer Dugan. This was another sapphic contemporary, kind of like opposites attract. Not really rivals to enemies, but sort of we got off on the wrong foot to lovers. And like that was a fun little story. I liked it. There's not much to say about that one, but it was a good story, especially if you're looking for sapphic contemporary. I think Jennifer Dugan is kind of known for that though, so maybe you've already read that. Then I read Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Y'all know the plot to this. I didn't like it. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I thought that the characterization was boring. I thought that the plot itself was... I wanted it to do things with the plot that it didn't end up doing, and I wasn't invested in anything that happened, which is fine. I believe that Aiden Thomas has announced a contemporary that's like a new adult college-y story that maybe has sports involved. That I would read, but I'm in no way interested in reading more fantasy from this author because I don't particularly like how they wrote the fantasy in Cemetery Boys, so I'm gonna leave that for the streets. For my Choices Book Club, we read We Are Totally Normal. I gave that 5, I think 4 or 5 stars. I really liked that book. I thought that it was messy and complicated, and it just reminded me of a teenager that could exist in the universe. I believe that the author has since come out as trans, and I'm totally blanking on what their name is, so I'm going to put that on the screen. But I thought that they did a wonderful job in that book, and I feel like there was some kerfuffling about that earlier in the year when that came out, but I thought it was really great. Next, I read The Devil in the White City, Murder, Magic, and Madness of the World at the Fair That Changed America by Eric Larson. This book was horrible. I've mentioned this several places, several times. I read this thinking that I was going to do a sort of like Rory Gilmore reads for the month of November, and it was just bad. It was just a horrible book. It was supposed to give us the history of the World's Fair in Chicago that year, as well as like the history of H.H. Holmes, and I just was getting whiplash the entire time. The narrative, like, I'm sure the information was like valuable, but it just wasn't like a 5-star read, so it was not fun for me. Then I read Dialect for Aunties by Jesse Q. Satanto, and I thought this book was also horrible. Like, there was no part of this book that was fun for me. It was like, it existed in this weird space where it wasn't quite a cozy mystery, I thought, but it also wasn't really a thriller, and it wasn't really a romance. I thought that the pacing was weird, where we had like these 3 random flashback chapters so that we could be invested in a love interest that would pop up later on at the wedding, and the aunties, which I don't even think had names. They were just like it felt like placeholders, like fourth auntie and big auntie and auntie this part, like none of them had a name. I thought they were all like I'm sure that those are like people who actually exist in reality, but I was just like, I don't know. It definitely felt like the kind of a premise that you could do in like a sitcom episode, but you couldn't really write in a book. And I think that's kind of where it fell apart for me, because it felt like I'm going to write this book and maybe Netflix will pick it up and then I'll have like a Netflix movie. Like, that's what that book felt like, where the quirky hijinks just weren't suited for the book that I was reading. And I'm happy that people enjoyed it, but I thought that book was ass. Definitely an honorable mention for worst of the year. Then I reread Anna Kay, A Love Story for the Choices Book Club. Y'all know I love that book. It's one of my all-time favorites. Jenny Lee can just do no wrong in my eyes. Then I read The Godfather by Mario Puzo, again as part of that Rory Gilmore reading challenge. It was going so well. And then we got to the part where Mr. Dick Too Big, he died. And when Mr. Dick Too Big died, the sort of story took a nosedive, because then it kind of just like fell into the story that Mario Puzo had telegraphed at the wedding scene. That is like the opening chapter of the book. So that was weird. There was like this whole like detour where we had to read about this child bride. I'm pretty sure it was a child bride situation. It was giving child bride situation, and how this child bride became a slave to her new husband's dick, and then that child bride died in a car bombing act. Like, it was a lot. It was quite the experience. part of what I read this was, well, part of the reason I had purchased this was because everyone and their mother compares it to the fucking Greenbone saga. They're like, oh, the Greenbone saga, it's like the Godfather. And maybe in his little movies did something with Mario Puzo's like work. But what I read was in no way anything like what I was reading when I was reading the Greenbone saga. Nothing at all. So I feel like if you're gonna make that comparison, maybe the movie, like maybe, but the book, I don't know. And I don't understand how anybody like read that book and then made a classic of American cinema, because the book is awful. And there are more books in this universe, but some of them don't make sense, because like the second book in this series definitely supposed to take place while one of the characters is like in exile in Italy, but like we saw him in exile in Italy and he wasn't doing the thing that he's supposed to be doing in that second book. So like I don't understand how that's supposed to make sense. Overall, again, I didn't like it. I thought it was horrible. Then we're getting into the things that I read mostly for vlogs, so I'll be able to fly through these. Our Violent Ends, that was for Patreon, so I didn't talk about it too much over here. But in my end of the year wrap up, maybe, did I talk about this? I don't think I did, but basically, oh, yeah, I did. It was in relation to Rebels Creed. So basically, Our Violent Ends, I thought was a fine book, but it was so similar to the first book that, like, one, I don't understand why people don't like it if they like the first book. I mean, I understand that you're reading the same book twice, but to say that it's, like, inherently worse, I don't know. I don't think that it was. But, like, could it be a letdown? Maybe. But to me, I still am hung up on this way where it's like the first book ended in such a way that it should have been the conclusion to a series. And so for you to get excited for the follow-up feels weird to me. It's kind of like you were setting yourself up for failure, because there was no way that it was going to be better. Like there was no, like, if you're going to retell Romeo and Juliet in the first book, Romeo and Juliet are alive, then the second book can only give us a dead Romeo and Juliet. So you know what I mean? Like, or a subversion of that. But the subversion of that would have to be so good that, like, again, you're kind of setting yourself up, I think, for a little bit of disappointment. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm living in the fantasy land. Maybe I'm the person that's actually in the wrong. But it was essentially like beat for beat the same. Some of the miscommunication was fine for me because I was like, okay, it's Romeo and Juliet. But at the same time, there were parts of the book where I was like, this miscommunication actually doesn't make sense. You are actually being, you're being pushed together so you will actually communicate. So let's communicate, maybe. You know, like, maybe, you know, it's like as a thought. But they didn't like that thought, and so they didn't communicate. And so it was just kind of like, why am I here? So overall, like, I don't love the second book, and I also think the epilogue ruins everything. If you're gonna hate anything about that book, I would hate the epilogue, because it was wholly unnecessary. And I feel like the ending of that book, it hits in such a strong like way that, like, when you turn the page and there's an epilogue, it's kind of like immediately undercuts everything. So that was just me. Didn't love it. Then I read While Justice Sleeps in a reading vlog. I loved it. I gave it like 4 stars, I believe. I think that Stacey Abrams did a really good job of making something that was believable with characters that I enjoyed reading about. If you like Dan Brown, if you like John Grisham, I think if you wanted to see a Dan Brown meets John Grisham, then you're going to like that. Then I read How We Fall Apart, and that book was just god-awful. It was, again, a contender for worst of the year. It was just not a good time. I thought the secrets these characters had were, one, stupid, but also the book is just entirely too short. I think it's under 300 pages, and so we don't really get any time with these characters. So when their secrets start coming out, it's kind of like, okay, but I didn't really know you. And some of these secrets really don't feel like that bad. Like, when your parents are like the wealthy of the wealthy, and again, there are like 2 scholarship students, so like their secrets, I was kind of like, okay, they can be a little bit off. But for the wealthy of the wealthy characters, I was like, if that's your secret, like, your life really is not ruined. Like, you will still be fine. You will still find a college that is going to accept you. So I didn't think that that was done well at all. Then I read The Marvelous by Claire Kahn. This was another like 3-star read, 2-star read. It was fine. It just didn't, I don't know. There was something about it. We're going to get into it on the live show, but I didn't hate the book, but I think I definitely was expecting more from it than it was able to provide. And that's not entirely on the book. Some of that is definitely on me, but something about it just didn't click. Then I read Darius the Great Is Not Okay by Deep Karam. This was a 5-star read. I loved everything about it. Here we follow Darius Keller as he and his family embark on a trip to Iran to visit Darius's dying father. while there, he like connects with this local boy. He has a lovely little friendship that like happens there. He and his father are able to rekindle their relationship after being kind of estranged. It's just a wholesome slice of life contemporary that I think everybody and their mother should read. Then I read Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. This is out April 5th, I believe. 5 out of 5 stars. Best book of 2021. We explore the Chinese diaspora. We explore colonization. We explore thievery. We're stealing back these zodiac fountainheads from various Western museums. And, you know, it's just great. It's great. There are some sapphics in there. I would not read the book for the sapphics because the sapphics do not appear to the very end. But if you're looking for some sapphic rep, this book does provide that. Then I read Assembly by Natasha Brown, mostly so I could hit my Goodreads goal, like my unofficial Goodreads goal. It was fine. It was very literary fiction. It was very, very lit fic. At times, I thought that the tortured nature of the sentence structure hindered the plot of the book and made it almost like I was listening to this and it made it almost unlistenable. Just like the amount of time that the novella would like dedicate to certain aspects. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read, but I doubt that I would ever really want to reread, even though it is so short. Then I read Darius the Great Deserves Better. This is the second book in the little Darius the Great universe, also by Adib Khorram, obviously. I have a reading vlog about this. I went in thinking it was going to be a love triangle romance, and it's still very much just Darius dealing with his life, only now he has to deal with his everyday life when he's back home in Portland and not on vacation in Iran. And so we follow his struggles, his sister, we don't follow Lale's struggles, but we hear about her being teased and how she, you know, comes to fit in her little gifted program. And again, it was just 5 out of 5 stars. I loved everything about that book. Then I listened to I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. This was like a little memoir situation. It was very different than what I was expecting going in, but it was fine. I enjoyed the discussions about her blackness in relationship to religion. I'm not a religious person, but I feel like I don't know. I feel like that's a topic that I don't read too much about, even though I know that, you know, just demographically speaking, black people love them some Jesus. So that was interesting. I enjoyed it. I would listen to it again. I'm not planning on unhauling my copy anytime soon. Then I read My Arc of Kiss and Tell, also by Adib Khorram, also included in that Adib Khorram reading vlog. It was fine. This I gave 4 out of 5 stars too. I think because it was Adib Khorram like first real intense look at a romance, that I don't know, it was missing some of the things that I had come to associate with Adib Khorram, but I feel like this is where you were starting with him. You would have a wonderful time. I think it's perfect for actual, like, the target demographic of YA, like 13 to 17, but there are also things that are included that an adult audience will appreciate and enjoy, and I think that's kind of a nice, I want to say a sweet spot, like all YA should, like, aim for that, but I think that it was nice. It was just a nice happenstance, maybe. So I enjoyed it. There were things I wish that we could have explored more. Like, I wish that the actual relationship between the boy band had been explored. And I almost wish that his relationship to his love interest had been explored. And I wish that it hadn't been, it's hard for me to say I wish it hadn't been a romance, because it does have a kind of a romancy arc. It does kind of end in a happily ever after, like, happy for now situation. But I don't really know how believable that particular aspect of the story was. Then I listened to Here's to Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera, and this is my worst book of 2021. Here's the thing. If you really hated What If It's Us, and you wanted, like, canon fix-it fic, you got it. You have to pay $18 for it. You know, it's not free. But Here's to Us just felt like author fan fiction, because people had bullied them, and they were like, you know what? If you're not going to leave my comment section and you're going to make it so I can't have my little NFT ring, then sure, here's your book. And it's like, I hate it because literally nothing happens. There's no plot, there's no character development, there is no character growth between the books. And so, like, that's the part that kills me. And, like, you guys have been working on this, you said, for, you know, years. Like, since you put out that first book, you guys have been following, like, emails. When I went to the Becky Albertalli, Aisha Saeed signing, is that her name, Aisha Saeed? Yeah, when I went to this signing, fucking Becky Albertalli was talking about how, yeah, they're trying to do a follow-up. And so it's like, you guys have definitely thought about this for a long time, and yet there was no character development, there was no plot. There was nothing. It was literally beat for beat the same as the first time around, which doesn't, like, here's my thing. If your first book is two characters going on 50 first dates, and at the end of 50 first dates, they're like, we can't do this. And so then 2 years later, they're like, oh, remember when we went on all those dates and we kept fucking up and we couldn't connect with one another? And we decided that we shouldn't be together. Actually, we should actually be together. It was just god awful. Like, it was bad fan fiction on top of it being fan fiction. So I can't recommend that book to literally anybody, but I know people are going to eat it up. They're going to eat it up. And I do think that it's like, I don't know. At this point, I'm officially over the both of them. I'm probably going to like, what if it's Yes, No, Maybe So is signed and personalized, but I think on my next trip to Half Price Books, it's going. Like, I'm over both of them as authors. I don't think that they are providing the content that they need to be providing, and they don't need my support. They're both New York Times bestsellers, so I'm done. And then the last book that I read in 2021 was Rebels Creed, which is another book that I put on my worst of the year list, because I just don't think that Daniel Green is that good of an author. I don't think that it was worth my time. And it was another thing where I felt that the second book, it kind of erased everything that was, I want to say good about the first book, but the first book did. Like, the first book attempted world building, it attempted a narrative structure, and Rebels Creed, you could tell, was a mashup of novellas. And the first half of the book was the first book told from Chapman's point of view, so we would understand him, only Chapman had been rewritten to be a completely different person than who we were reading from in the first book. I think because of the feedback he received about how his police were written. So that was a wash. And while the second part of the book was infinitely times better than the beginning, it also, like, didn't have great world building. It fell into this plot where the evil empire was going to go colonize the indigenous people, when I was like, okay, I don't know if I really care to read that story. And then secondly, the rebellion, I mean, like, it's fine if you have, like, no good characters, but you could see that Daniel Green was, like, very clearly trying to illustrate these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and yet he had his good guys just decide to murder innocent civilians for the fun of it so they could, like, run away. And I thought that was kind of fucked up on them. So, I mean, there was no real, I thought, examination of the fact that they were going to plant bombs around the city to distract, so they could, like, break into this building and, like, leave on ships. Like, I feel like that should have, like, we should just lingered on that for a little bit, because you're going to blow up parts of the city, attacking men and women and children, innocent people who have, like, nothing to do with the Empire or with you guys, just for the funsies. And, like, again, I get it, like, that's part of a war, but at this point, they're not really at war. They're not really. And then when they said that they had, 1 million casualties, like 500,000 just random people, like, actually died. 500,000 people that were not, in the Empire Guard or the police force, just random everyday citizens, and then only 700 rebels. I was like, sir, there are no rebels at this point. But okay, so that's what I read. I was not a huge fan. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of why I have decided that my ass needs to not buy books, because where is this little column? I spent a whopping $1,026.96 purchasing books, which sounds like a lot of money. And then I think back on what I actually spent, like what I actually purchased, because I try my hardest to go to my local indie bookstore, because most of the books there are used, and because I'm there so often, I have, like, actual reward points. Like, I actually save money when I shop there. Like, when I did my, like, that reading unread books, when I held my unread books and I was like, oh, this book was like $5, or like this book was $10, like, that's what was written on the inside flap. But I know that when I actually purchased that book, I probably spent like $3 because of the reward points that I have there. And I was like, sure, we can apply them today. But I also know that I bought the Greenbone Saga set, and that was like $100. And then, like, after shipping and everything. And then I have a Litjoy Shadowhunters. I bought it because the Mortal Instruments are, one, the only Shadowhunter series that I care about, and two, they're the series that no one ever does special editions for. And I was like, they're annotated, they're signed, and once you take the ugly dust jacket off, they're kind of pretty. So I'm gonna buy them. They have not shipped yet. I think the shipping has now been pushed to February, but that was like $250 before shipping. So a good third of what I spent money on was on 9 books. And I think that, like, I still am very much interested in not purchasing more than 1 book a month, because I don't need them. Like, my shelves are nowhere near like full and like bursting, and I have to like double stack and like do all the this, that, and the third. But I think I'm reaching a point in my life where I actually have like very little joy associated with owning books. And so I'm trying to be much more mindful about the books that I do own. And so I do believe that in my next unhaul video, I will be culling a significant number of the books on my shelf, which some of them I have kept only because I have like sprayed to the edges, and I'm just kind of like, I don't think they're going to want it. But at this point, I'm willing to risk it. Like, I would rather bring them there and then they say no and I have to drop them off at a Goodwill than, when I say there, I mean like half price books. But it's like, they bring me no joy. They're doing no service to me by staying on these shelves. I will say that of the, $1,000 that I spent, I did read approximately $799 worth of the books that I purchased. So of the books that I did buy and I spent money on, $798 worth I did read. I did read that. So that was good. And my library saved me another $793. And I actually know that my library saved me more than $793 because I only include books on the spreadsheet that I actively read. Like, I check out approximately 20 books a month from my library. I don't read anywhere near 20 books a month. So, you just do, 20 books a month. Let's do the math on that. If I do 20 books a month, most of what I read will do an average of like $18 because I check out adult books, I check out young adult books. That's a very low number. $18. So 20 books a month, $18, 12 months in a year. That's approximately $4,000 right there. So I know that just going to my library is actually saving me more than $793, but of what I read, that's what I saved. And even on top of that, I only include the format that I finished the book in. Oftentimes I'll go to the library and check out the hardcover, and then I'll get the audiobook from Libby. So if I finish the book on Libby, that's the price of the book that I finished. Like, that's what I write in the spreadsheet. I don't put like, oh, I got the physical and the audiobook and this is how much I saved. Going into 2022, I might do that because I feel like that's a more honest representation of what I saved. But that's just kind of the two things that I thought were interesting. I mean, I don't really care about author breakdown or like the diversity and like what I'm reading. I do kind of look at the little world map that they put in. I'll list it over here. This is a very sad looking global map where he's not reading from a ton of different countries. I'm not entirely sure how important that is to me at this current stage of my reading. Maybe it should be more important, maybe it shouldn't. I don't really know. At this point, like I said, it's not something that I'm super focused on. Maybe for 2022 I'll try to make it a bit more spaced out, but that's kind of where I'm at. This wound up being a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I also knew I was going to be talking about a lot of things, so I guess I can't be actually that surprised. So thanks for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, you can go ahead and drop this emoji down there in the comment section. But I'll see you guys again soon with another video. But until then, and until next time.